Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Online with the CMC presentation. Today we have Dr. Pamela Thomas and Eric McKinney presenting Don't Go Changing, the new 334, 340, and 563 MARC fields. Please post any questions you have in the chat box and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. This session is also being recorded and the recording will be emailed to you once available. The slides for this presentation are also currently available in L2, and after the presentation is over, slides with notes will be uploaded to L2 for download. Now, without further ado, take it away, Pam and Eric.
Thanks, Katie. Welcome, everybody. As Katie mentioned, Eric and I will be talking about the relatively new 340 and 563 fields, as well as the new way that 334 field can be used in your bibliographic records. All three fields are optional, and we will take questions at the end of the presentation. So examples of the 334, which is mode of issuance, the 340, physical medium, and 563, binding information, MARC fields, will be discussed and shared. Although the 334 field is not new, it is now used for more than just continuing resources. So the 334 mode of issuance MARC field has historically been only used for serials. However, it can now be used for other formats of materials. The 334 field is optional. OCLC bib formats and standards defines the 334 field as a categorization reflecting whether a manifestation is issued in one or more units. Subfield A is for mode of issuance term. Subfield B is mode of issuance code, and subfield 2 is the source of term. There are also subfield 0, authority record control number or standard number, 1, real world object URI, 6, linkage, and 8, field link and sequence number. However, OCLC instructs us not to use subfield 0 or 1, and subfield 6 is system supplied. You will typically see the 334 coded for single unit or multiple unit as shown on the slide. This field does not end in a period. Subfield 2 RDA MI equals mode of issuance, and both indicators are blank. This is the Illinois Central Railroad Bridge 1918 accident and other information, which was cataloged by the CMC for Groff Memorial Library. We're going to use this several times during the presentation. So here we can see the 334 field for the Illinois Central Railroad Bridge 1918 accident, and we can see that the manifestation is a single unit when we look at the 334 field. So this is the chronology of military service of Major Thomas W. Morgan, 1861 to 1864, and I do use this several times in the presentation as well. And this was also cataloged by the CMC staff, and it was for the Morrison Talbot Library. So let's look at a part of our MARC record here. So you can see that this also was coded, the 334 field was coded for a single unit. So it's just one book. Okay, and this is our Miller family, which was cataloged by the CMC staff for Allerton Public Library District, and we're going to use this several times in the presentation as well. So let's look at part of the bib record. So as you can see on this slide, this is another single unit manifestation. And then we've got the David Davis Mansion blueprint. This was recently cataloged. It was of the 1972 renovation of the David Davis Mansion, which is located in Bloomington, Illinois, and it was cataloged for the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Museum. And I will use this several times in the presentation as well. So let's look a bit at the bib record. So here's an example of the MARC field 334, and this time we've got multiple unit in the 334 because there were 62 sheets of blueprints in this collection. Now Eric is going to talk to you about the 340 field.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And as Pam said, I am going to talk about the 340 field, which is the physical medium OCLC describes it as physical description information for an item that requires technical equipment for its use, and or more granular description information of an item's material properties to facilitate access and discovery or to support collection management. Coded physical information is contained in fields 007 and 008. And while we'll see examples of items that require technical equipment, for the most part, this is used for the more granular description. As Pam noted, it is not a new field, but it is used infrequently currently, so I'm hoping to change that. It's an optional field, but it can be useful for adding a lot of helpful descriptors to an item. Today, we're going to look at the 340 subfields A and P, as well as subfield 3 to see what types of information we can include with our items to help make them more accessible. I took our RDA approved terms from RDA Registry's value vocabularies. Where the RDA registry does not have a value vocabulary for a subfield, I took my examples from OCLC's bibliographic formats and standards. All resources will be included at the end of the presentation. So let's start with subfield A, which is the material base and configuration. The material base, or just the physical substance and configuration on which the information is recorded. The materials concept index list, or the CIL, in RDA registry has 48 labels covering most types of material. It's too many for us to cover all of them today, but we can look at some of the more common ones, and we'll provide a link to all of them on the resources page at the end of the presentation. 340 subfield A is typically used for 3D objects, realia more so than books. For example, this board game library was cataloged by our supremely talented metadata cataloger, Katie X. Katie described the game as one game, 350 book cards, 10 library cards, one answer sheet pad, one category die, 6 pencils, one 2-minute timer, one game board, 6 library book pawns, 5 divider cards, one 2-page folded instruction booklet, one plastic box insert, and one cardboard container for book cards. And here's the basic description of the materials Katie found were used in constructing the components. Now, this is not the completed 340 in the final record. I pared it down just a little bit, only to illustrate subfield A. We will look at and see Katie's complete formatting of the library game at the end of this portion of the presentation. But as you can see, Katie determined that the materials were made of wood, cardboard, paper, and plastic. As Pam mentioned, subfield 2 is the code for the controlled vocabulary that the terms came from. In this case, the RDA Registry's materials concept index list, which is shortened to RDA MAT. If you have an item that does not have a label that accurately describes it, you can still list the material in subfield A and simply omit subfield 2, since you're not pulling the term from a controlled vocabulary. And we will see some examples of that later in the presentation. The indicators here are not defined, so we leave those blank. And that leads us to subfield B, the dimensions, which are the measurements of the material configuration. The RDA registry does not have a value vocabulary for dimensions, so the examples here were taken straight from OCLC's bibliographic standards website. You might be used to seeing CM as the measurement for books, but other dimensions are more suitable for materials besides books. For instance, you might see MM, or millimeter, for films, MIN, period, or the abbreviation for minutes for a videotape, or IN, period, the abbreviation for inches for audio discs. Note the abbreviation for inches and minutes are the only ones with periods. It's not necessary for 35 millimeter. And that brings us to subfield C, which is the material applied to the surface, which is just the physical substance applied to the material base. And this can also apply to a variety of 3D objects and realia. If a material has been applied to the surface of the item, you can record it here. For example, if cataloging an original painting, you could use acrylic paint or oil paint, depending on what the artist used. Salvador Dali used oil paint to paint the original Persistence of Memory painting. So if we're cataloging the original, we would use oil paint. Because I can't afford an original Dali, we catalog for the glory and not necessarily the riches. I only have a print. So we would use ink as the term for my print where we're cataloging it. Our next example is a set of rubber stamps. These were created using a computer numerical control routing machine, or a CNC router, which is a very fun tool for your makerspace if your library should have one. These were made for a local school that was going to put on a health fair right before COVID hit. Bad timing. So these weren't quite finished out, so they never were used. But you can see on the top 2 stamps up here that they have a wood background. But the stamping material itself is rubber. So in this case, our 340 would look like 340 subfield C rubber, subfield 2 RDA matte. as we are able to take wherever is a term on the list. So we can list that in subfield 2. Subfield D is the information recording technique, or the technique used to record the information in or on the material base. RDA registry has 20 labels on the CIL for subfield D. Our examples above include one of the blueprints Pam talked about earlier, and a letter with the cool old-timey writing. Blueprint process comes directly from the CIL, so I can include subfield 2 to denote the controlled vocabulary I use to find the term. While the note is handwritten, the CIL does not have to offer that label for use, but I still want to note it in my record. So in this case, I put it in subfield D and I simply omit subfield 2. You might sometimes see a period at the end of a 340 if it does not include a subfield 2. However, when cataloging by the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, PCC, or OCLC bibliographic standards, we omit the period. Other labels for description include etching, inscribing, burning, and think actual heat here, like wood burning, not CDs, DVDs, as well as embossing. Subfield E is the support, or the physical material on which or in which records are mounted, bound, or otherwise supported. Again, our labels are taken from the RDA registry's RDA material list. Our first example here is a plaque which consists of metal lettering on a metal background, which is the support. So in this case, we would choose metal as our supporting material and include our subfield 2. Or perhaps you have a collection of scrimshaw, like this piece from the collection in the Smithsonian. In that case, we can use the label ivory in subfield C, since it is used as the underlying material that the etching is created on. And that also is on the registry list, so there's our subfield 2, RDA mat. Subfield F is the production rate / ratio, which is simply the normal rate or ratio at which the information in the material must be used to be meaningful. This might include the magnification ratio of photographic reductions, revolutions per minute for sound recordings, and or scale for a map. The record album above plays at 33 1/3 RPM. Playing at any other RPM would make it less, if at all, meaningful. The same can be said for the map, which is 1 to 10,000 scale. If you're trying to use it out in the real world, but are using any other scale like 1 to 20,000, you're probably not going to end up where you intended. Subfield G is the color content, the color characteristics of the content of a resource. There are only 2 choices on the CIL for color content, monochrome and polychrome. I used to think monochrome was just like black and white and that was it, but that's really not it. The definition is a color content that consists of tones of one color, or black and white, or black or white and another color. So our first picture here of Tyrian and Oberon is in grayscale, so it can be considered as monochrome. Our second picture here is in color. We would define that as polychrome, which OCLC defines as a color content that consists of 2 colors, neither of which is black or white, or more than 2 colors. While Tyrian and Oberon themselves may still be monochrome in the picture, there are more than 2 colors present besides their black and white coats. This picture is considered polychrome, while the dogs are considered adorable. Subfield H is the location within the medium. The location of the described materials within the material base and configuration. This is helpful if you want to point to a specific part of the whole. If you're cataloging that mixtape you made for your bestie and you want to note a song with particular meaning, you can use 340 subfield H to note where on the cassette the song lives. Similarly, if you have a rack of slides but want to give special attention to a certain slide, you can simply note it in 340 subfield H. Subfield I is access requirements involving technical equipment, which was kind of the first part of our description of the physical field. I kind of think of this one as similar to subfield F. Here you want to list what equipment is needed to use material, that is what is needed to make it meaningful. VHS tapes are not going to be much good without a VHS player. If your library circulates video games, it's important for the patron to know what system that game will work with. Someone who checks out a Microsoft Xbox One game but has a PlayStation isn't going to be terribly happy. Subfield J is the generation, which is defined as the relationship between an original carrier and the carrier of a reproduction made from the original. RDA registry provides a total of 18 generation labels, well 19, but duplicate has been deprecated, and it's used for sound recording, film strips, and microfilm. Record albums are usually created by making copies of a master recording. The album above was created in such a master, so it is defined as a derivative master, which is a generation that is derived from the master. That's probably one of the most straightforward definitions I've seen in all of cataloging. That's per the RDA registry. The description of printing master for microfilm denotes that it is a generation used for making copies of the resource. Other labels include master, which is a high-resolution digital recording used to make derivative copies, and master tape, which is the original recorded version of a tape. Subfield K is for the layout, which is the concepts for an arrangement of text, images, tactile notation, or other content in a manifestation. The CIL for layout has 17 labels, many of which are geared towards music resources such as scores. Subfield 2 for layout is RDA LEY. The score above is an example of an open score, or a layout that consists of music presented in units called parallels. Subfield K also allows the description of music scores that are in Braille. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a physical example, but this image from the Library of Congress shows one form of a Braille scale. Because it's an example page, none of the labels for subfield K really represent my image, but I wanted to show what one looked like just because I thought it was cool. The traditional bars with notes and chords is at the top, and the Braille equivalent is printed beneath. Next is our subfield L, which is the binding, and that's the method used to bind a published or unpublished resource or other binding information. Case binding is a type of binding that sews or glues sheets into sections that are glued together to form a flat spine and that are attached to end papers, which are in turn attached to a stiff outer casing. And that's just a fancy way of saying hardback. A paperback is described as perfect binding, which OCLC defines as a type of binding that glues sheets together and to a flexible outer casing to form a spine. Many of you might have board books in your children's collections. OCLC describes their binding as a type of binding for sheets of thick paperboard with covers that are folded and bound to form a spine. Thick paperboard being the key here. And finally, we have an example of a spiral bound item, which is a type of binding that uses a continuous wire or plastic coil that is threaded through holes along the edge of each sheet. This shouldn't be confused with comb binding, which uses closely spaced curved flaps of metal or plastic that are threaded through the holes of each sheet. Other bindings you might come across include 3-ring binders, which would be an open ring binding if it is a resource that can be opened to remove outdated sheets and insert new ones. You should use closed ring binding if the resource cannot be opened to include or remove sheets. Saddle stitch binding is used for items that are folded paper stapled along the fold to form a spine. Springback binding has a metal spring to clamp the materials in. It can be opened to add or remove sheets. Slide binding uses a single length of metal or plastic bent in a C cross section which holds the sheets in place. And Pam will tell us a bit more about binding coming up as she describes the 563 field for us. So that brings us to M, the book format. OCLC defines the book format as the result of folding a printed sheet to form a gathering of leaves, a sheet folded once to form a folio, twice to form a quarto, 3 times to form an octavo. The basic definition on Wikipedia is just the double-sided page folded vertically, but I found the complete definition a bit more helpful. The term folio, from Latin folium or leaf, has 3 interconnected but distinct meanings in the world of books and printing. First, it is a term for a common method of arranging sheets of paper into book form, folding the sheet only once, and a term for a book made in this way. Second, it is a general term for a sheet, leaf, or page in especially manuscripts and old books. And third, it is an approximate term for the size of a book and for a book of this size. RDA registry has 15 labels to use depending on your format, and we do have a link to the complete list. Our example here is Shakespeare's first folio, circa 1623. So here we have 340 subfield M folio, subfield 2 RDA, and BF for book format. Subfield N is where we record the font size, the size of type used to represent the characters and symbols in a resource. RDA registry only has 3 labels for font size. In addition to large print, there is also giant print. But you may still record information in subfield N if you have an item that doesn't fall under any of those descriptors. Here we have a typewritten letter where it is noted that it was typed with a 12-point font. Here we can go ahead and put our 340 subfield N. Note that it was 12 points, but we omit our subfield 2 in this case. Subfield O is the polarity. And here, Obi and Tyrion are going to help us again. It is the relationship of the colors and tones in an image to the colors and tones of the object reproduced. This is used when cataloging images. The only three options on the RDA registry are positive, negative, and mixed polarity. And again, here we have Obi and Tyrion demonstrating positive and negative polarity for us. Good dogs. Subfield P is where we record illustrative content. Here are the general or specific indications of the type or types of illustrative content contained in a source. There are 15 labels in the RDA registry. However, 3 are listed as deprecated. Illustrations and illuminations, are now recorded in the singular. The term music is no longer recorded in the 340 subfield P at all. The 300 field above is from an older edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. It has a variety of illustrative content that we can account for with 340p. Because there are both color and black and white illustrations and maps, we will need to add both monochrome and polychrome to our record. After that, we add all other illustrative content listed in the 300. Like illustration and map, plan and portrait are also listed on the CL for illustrative content in the RDA registry. However, diagram is not. So we still went ahead and accounted for our diagram, but we did omit subfield 2 since it's not on our controlled vocabulary list. And that brings us to material specified, which is subfield 3. And here's where you specify the materials contained. This is where you can get even more granular with some of the descriptions that you're using. It's especially useful when you have something like kits where musical items are included. We started with our library game, so let's take a look at the 340s as Katie did them in their full format. So if you recall, Katie listed wood, cardboard, paper, and plastic as our material base, but here we can break that down just a little bit more and differentiate between the items. Here Katie has noted that the die and the pawn are made of wood, the container was cardboard, the answer sheet pad and instruction booklet from paper, and the timer and box insert from plastic. And because all labels are from the material CIL, Katie added RDA mat in subfield 2. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Pam, who will tell us about the uses of the 563 field.
Okay, so MARC field 563 is for binding information. Again, the 563 field is optional. Both indicators are blank. OCLC bib formats and standards defines the 563 field as a note about binding information for primarily antiquarian materials, rare books, and other special collections. Do not use for serials bound together after publication for shelving and storage purposes. So you're not always going to be using the 563. So subfield A is for the binding note, and subfield U is the uniform resource identifier. Subfield 3 is material specified. Subfield 5 is the institution to which the field applies. Subfield 6 is linkage, and subfield 8 is field link and sequence number. I have really only seen the 563 field with a subfield A. For more information about subfields U, 3, 5, 6, and 8, you can go to the OCLC bib formats and standards page. And the example on the slide above is from the Amelia Bungener Strunk Wilhelm Strunk manifestation, which the CMC cataloged for Morton Public Library District. Okay, so let's look at the Illinois Central Railroad Bridge 1918 accident. So this has a 563 field for binding information. I've included the 340 fields and the 563 field. As you can see, the 340 subfield L informs us that this manifestation has open ring binding, while the 563 expands on that information by providing the detail that the open ring binding is on the left-hand side. Having a 340 subfield L and a 563 field is allowed. If you look at bib formats and standards under 340 subfield L instructions, subfield L binding, a method used to bind a published or unpublished resource or other binding information may be recorded using a controlled term or other structured description. And for a list of RDA controlled terms, you can see the RDA type of binding. And then there are additional unstructured or textual information on binding, which may be recorded in field 563. Okay, let's look again at our chronology of military service of Major Thomas W. Morgan, 1861 to 1864. So as you can see on the slide, the 340 subfield L is with spiral binding, and then the 563 expands on that, letting us know that there is spiral binding with metal rings on the left-hand side. Okay, and then on our next example, in our Miller family, there is again a 340 subfield L spiral binding, and then our 563 has the added information that the spiral binding is on the left side of the volume. Okay, and here are the resources that we used to create this presentation. And do you have any questions for us? And then here are the CMC staff that are on the call.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pamela Thomas and Eric McKinney, for this thoroughly informative presentation. Like Pam said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post them in the chat box. I will also unmute everybody. So if you're able to, feel free to open up your microphone and ask a question. I'll unmute people now.
Thank you, Katie.
And yeah, the only, not even a question right now, is that Blake commented pertaining to the Tyrion and Oberon that 340 you should have a subfield G adorable.
I think that's fair.
I like it.
And just a reminder while we're waiting for questions, you know, we've moved these to the second Thursday of the month, and all of our online with the CMCs are loaded into L2. So feel free to register for our future ones.
We do have a question. Is the 340 necessary when there's a 563?
Necessary, I mean, again, because these are all optional, right? No, but I would add it. I think it's helpful, but that's just my opinion. But since it's optional, you don't have to add it.
I agree, Pam. I do find it helpful, and I kind of think of them two as just working in tandem with one another. So if I do have the 340, I do add the 563.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Elaine Chapman asks, is the 340 field, in the 340 field, if the item specifies the font size, should the font size be in its own 340 field?
Yes, it would.
And then Anne from Galesburg asks, would we use the 563 for how archival items are stored, or more how the items are bound?
Bound, because the 563 is for binding information.
No more questions right now. Maybe there'll be a couple more. I have a question. Is the 563 repeatable? Like if you had a collection of items or that had different bindings, I don't.
Let me look that up.
And then Mary has an existential question. Why would you think plates was excluded from the illustrative content index?
Good question.
Oh, Mary. we can't explain how people think. Yes, the 563 is repeatable.
Okay.
Although I don't know if I've seen duplicate 563s in a record, but yeah, it's repeatable if you need to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Mary, maybe you could, you know, maybe send a email to AskQC about adding, unless if that's really more for the RDA toolkit people, adding plates as illustrative content. And I know we've got topics for this fiscal year, and for us fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th, but we are always looking for topics for next fiscal year. So if there's something you would like us to cover, we would love to do that, because we would love to do, you know, topics that you guys are interested in. So you can email the CMC. I'll put that in the text box or chat box. And send us your topics. Okay, Anna. Sorry, go ahead. Or Anna, you could unmute yourself and ask it. Oh, she said it won't allow her.
I thought I I thought I unmuted everybody.
I'm checking the box right now.
Yeah,
Anna, you should be able to do it now. Oops, maybe it won't let me. There it is. Try it again.
okay, can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. Yes.
Okay. So if you have like a board game or something, and I know in the example you had them all like separated out with the subfield 3, but like if you have multiple things that are plastic, like can you put them in the same field? Or like if something was multiple, like if you had a timer or something that was like plastic and metal, like could you do those together, or would you have to do like a separate field for each of those, like timer plastic, timer metal? Does that make sense?
I think I would do them separately. Sorry, Eric, if you wanted to answer that one.
I agree. So I agree, Pam. I was just muted there, but yeah, I would do them in a separate 340 field.
And yeah, if you had different items that were of the same material, I would probably still do the subfield 3, you know, and specify, yeah, like if the timer is plastic and like your dice was plastic, for example, I would have 2 separate 340 fields for that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And, you know, we don't know, in library land what people are planning to use these 340 fields for. So I feel like the more information we provide in them, the better, you know, just for the future. Okay. Okay, did anybody else have any other questions? Radio silence, I know.
Well, if no more questions are coming in, then I just want to say thank you again, Pam and Eric. As a reminder, the recording of this session will be emailed to you once it's available, and shortly after this presentation, the slides with notes will be uploaded to L2 for download. Currently, the slides available do not have notes attached. And then thank you all for joining us. Our next Online with the CMC presentation will be Thursday, October 13th at 10 a.m. And again, that's the second Thursday of the month, not the third anymore. The presentation is called Getting to Know You, Special Collections in Your Library, and will be presented by Barb Scobie. Thank you all again for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your week. And
Thanks,
we're getting
guys.
a lot of thank yous coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.
Okay, do you want to stop the recording?
Yep.